Thornton, thank you, and appreciate the invitation. My wife and I are here, and it's good to be a part of anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd certainly like you to be very open-minded of anything that I have to say. It should be about me. It always has been. And everybody, including me, has a perception problem. First thing I want to do when I get around a group like this is pass the basket. Hadn't heard that yet, but I'm willing. I'm Bob Smith, and I'm an alcoholic. And it is by the grace of God and people like y'all in this recovery program, I'm here sober. And my dry date's August the 5th, 64. And that's 10 or 15 minutes at a time or a day at a time, not in different years. And I was first introduced to AA in 1962. And and I've let my mouth overload some of my components several times. And I said if I got drunk and this and that again, well, I'd go to an AA meeting. Didn't know what it was. Never been, certainly. I had several preachers, and we got a lot of nice preachers here. One, I got him early on when he was just a reverend, and the time he got through playing with me, he was a doctor. And that's fine. He stayed willing. And this preacher one time asked me, he said, Bob, have you ever went to an AA meeting? I said, no. Don't know what they are. He said, well, we let them have a meeting back here in the back room of the church. They meet back there, and he said, I've really never been in a meeting, don't really know what they do. And he says, all I know is they drink a lot of coffee and smoke a lot of cigarettes. And they don't drink. And I said, preach, I don't want to go. And I didn't. And, we do what we have to do to get set in these are good chairs. And a lot better than the ones that at my home group, and we're still active in AA. We go to 3 or 4 meetings a week. And so I was still, and I made these promises to loved ones. I was married, had 3 kids. I had a strange lifestyle. I mean, see, when I got here, there was people got up and introduced or talked about. I was in a room with a lot of winos and winettes. And I looked them over, and I didn't want to drink with them winettes. But the thing is that everybody seemed to share. And I had, like I said I would go to an AA meeting if I got drunk and off on one of these 3 or 4 day deals. And I came back, and the house I lived in, my key didn't fit. And I was fixing to work on the door, but I didn't. And she opened the door and she says, what do you want? I said, well, I want in. All drunks want in. And it may not stay long, but they want in. And so she says, well, are you going to do what you said you'd do? And I said, which time? And she brought this AA business up, and I said, sure, I don't mind going. And of course, when I'm half drunk, I'm pretty easy. And of course, I was always giving directions. I said, get the phone book over there, and our phone still worked. My lifestyle was I stayed at least 2 house payments behind. I had trouble keeping all the utilities working at the same time. But they said don't get 3 house payments behind because they'll come get your house. I couldn't do that. or I sure didn't want to. Anyway, she dialed 2 or 3 numbers, and they didn't have a meeting that night. And finally, there's one answered, and they had the meeting that night. And it was over at 5th and M when it was still there. And this was in September of '62. And so I had me some more drinks between then and meeting time, and here we go. And get over there, and you walk down quite a few steps, and you get down there's a lot of people over on this side, and not any over here on the other side of the wall. And I stood there and looked, and somebody said, "What are you looking for?" I said, "Where's the AA meeting?" Well, he said they hadn't got here. They'd be here in a minute. And I said, "What are y'all going to do?" "Oh, we're going to play bingo." Already a whole room full of them. But the thing is that I went in there, and they did gather. They had a meeting, opened it the same way y'all did. The 3 guys got up there and talked about some stuff that we didn't even talk about over at the bootleg joint. I mean, that didn't make sense to me. And at the end of the meeting, they said, "Are there any new people? Raise your hand." Like I say, I don't mind raising my hand. It was myself and 2 others. And they just clapped. That don't make sense. And they said, "Y'all keep coming back." And that sure didn't make sense, because I wasn't invited back nowhere. And so then they said, "Well, we're at the spiritual part," and I knew something was ringing, something gonna happen. And they started passing the basket. Well, I didn't have any money. And they passed it, and then they said, "Well, we're gonna stand up and be dismissed in the usual manner." And they said the Lord's Prayer, and I couldn't even remember it. The meeting's over. I'm wanting to get back out to the pickup because I got a drink out there and I need it. People coming up, patting me on the back, telling me to come back. It's hard to dodge and get out of all them people. And this guy tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and looked him over, and he got on tinted glasses. He got him one of the beginner mustaches. He got a suit and a tie. And he stuck his hand out and he said, "My name's Joe and I'm an alcoholic." I don't know. I didn't get into that deal. I said, "Okay." And whoa, I'm fixing to go again. He said, "No," says, "You live here in town?" "Yeah." "Well, what about a phone number?" "Well, see, my lifestyle, I had an unlisted telephone number. I didn't want nobody calling me. And just because you're in business for yourself, it don't mean you got to give out that phone number." And Joe's asking me several little old questions, didn't amount to much. He said, "You married?" I said, "Yeah, I got 3 kids." "Well, where's she at?" I said, "That's her back there." "Well," says, "does she drink?" I said, "No, she needs to." And, that's the way I saw it. And so I'm trying to get out again. But I did give him my phone number. And I left out of there, and I got me another drink, and then I was drunk again. And back then we had a little old judge downtown that, bless his heart, he loved to fill out commitment papers. And so it took some other people doing a little thinking for me, and they did. They filled out some commitment papers, and then they got a hold of me and gave me a choice: ride with the deputies or 2 people that's in AA. And that wasn't no big choice. I sure didn't want to ride with the deputies, but I get down there and get over to that ad building, and If they'd have wired me up to a lie detector and asked me, said, Bob, are you an alcoholic? I said no. And I don't think the needle would have quivered because I didn't know what an alcoholic was. I know I had a drinking problem, and I know I'd tried to do something about it, and others had tried to do something about it. I grew up in a home that they never cut any of the utilities off. Nothing was ever said about being behind on a house payment. I think it was paid for. And my dad drank. He did. First whiskey I ever drank, I stole from him. Put it in Mother's fruit jar. And, you know, but I'm there. And they put you in that little old beginner hospital over there. And, of course, I drank and I smoked, and I don't have anything to drink and I don't have anything to smoke. So I'm whining about that. And here come Precious. And she was a short nurse. She's, about 5'2", and she should have been about 6 foot. And anyway, she said, well, we don't have anything here to drink. And she continued to not even bring me anything to smoke. Finally, she brought me some of that state stuff, and you roll it. And I'm raising a little bit of Cain about this drink, and she says, all right, Bob, I'll bring you something to drink. And she came back in a little while. She said, it don't smell too good, but if you'll put it in there, it'll go to work. Big glass. And so the smell was not good, but I never cared about the smell, much less even the taste. And I put it in there, and that's the day I met formaldehyde. And a little later on, Precious, she brought me another. And, you know, she's getting to where she's looking pretty good about that time. And I was in there a couple of days, and they took me over to the ward, and that's when I met Shelby. And he talked so fast, I didn't know what was going on. There's a lot of other guys in there. I think it's 26 or 7. And they was from around West Texas. And one would come in, they'd go over and shake his, you know, I hadn't seen you in about 6 months. Where you been? And I made a few steps, saw a guy I knew that I didn't like. He had been a power figure in my life and an authority figure. He was an ex-assistant high school principal of mine from Lubbock High. And I didn't think glad to see him. I'm thinking getting even. And they put you to work, and they put me to work over in that kitchen number 5, and he worked there too, and he and I got to know one another, and he's a good guy. Just had a drinking problem. And, you know, that's not any different than any place else. You're going to eventually get out. And I did. And people picked me up and brought me back, and I hadn't been in town an hour. And Joe called. And he said, I'm going to be by there after you, and I'm going to take you to a meeting. And that's fine. And Joe was a man that kind of ruled with an iron fist. It didn't mean I did everything he said, but he had a lot of suggestions, and then there was some demands, and I kept going to the same group, kept doing this and that, and we all have experience in AA. First negative experience I had was there at the group, and I went to a little old Monday night study group that 4 or 5 or 6 of us would be there. And there was a guy that seemed to, I didn't know who he was, didn't make any difference, but They said he wasn't any presidents, but he acted like one. And anyway, people are going to say something funny, you know. And they'd say something funny, I'd laugh, and they wouldn't. But it don't take long to screw that meeting up. And he got hot about it, and he quit coming for a little bit, but he came back. And then I'm going, and Joe's giving me these instructions. He says, now don't you be interfering with anybody else's life. I didn't know what that meant, but I said, okay. So anyway, there's a guy there said, Bob, they tell me I need a sponsor. Will you sponsor me? I said, oh, I can't do that. I said, I got to talk to my sponsor. And so I talked to Joe, and I said, God, I feel sorry for that guy. But anyway, he says, well, whatever it is, and he said, told me what step we was working on. I said, okay. He said, but then you're going to check with me. And I did, after step 1 and after step 2. And we was working on step 3. And about that time, the ladies had invited the girl to come to Al-Anon. And she's been going to some Al-Anon meetings. And they're telling us that probably she needs to be in AA. That ain't none of my business. And so he brought her in AA, and this boy, over the long weekend, they're at the house. And I didn't know what they was doing. I just see him on Monday. And so he didn't show up this next Monday. And so I go by there and knock on her door later, and well, she said, I don't know where he's at. I said, okay. I said, what happened? Well, she said, we've been doing step work. And says, he wasn't down at step 5 yet, but I thought I was. And she said, she shared some of her life and some of her mischief with him. And so he took drunk again. Didn't see him. Sheriff found him about 2 weeks later. He had got the hose and his exhaust pipe and run it up and put it in his pickup, and he is dead. It was something that should have never happened, but it did. And this thing of newcomers working the steps together when probably neither one of them know what they are. The group I went to at the end of 365 days, they bake you one of them $1.29 cakes. They'd put a candle on it and light it and give it to you. And I looked it over, and you take a guy like me that's not drinking a year, I got more coming than that candle and that cake. But that happens to me up here where I live. And along in that first year, I'd traded work boots and work clothes for alligator shoes and silk suits. It was a deal that Joe had me making amends for my wreckage of the past. And it was more on the amend deal that kept me going to AA than it was alcoholism, really. Because I didn't want to spend a long time in jail. Up front, I had to go see the district attorney. Hot checks. Well, I didn't have enough money in the bank. And I had to go see the IRS, back taxes. And I had to go see the banker. I'd sold some mortgage property, and I'd kept the money. And they wanted it, pretty serious about it. And whenever the first exposure to what I had to do, Joe says, you got to go see these people. I said, well, will you go with me? He said, Lord, don't. So I did. I went. Everybody had an open door policy, and they extended a hand and gave me a way to go. And I had found a way to go is the only reason. See, it took me a little over 7 years to pay out. Now, I could have done it a little quicker, but I get sidelined. I got mad at them down in Hempfields because they just made black and brown alligator shoes. I thought they ought to have another color. And obsessions of the mind. It's a lady I was married to. We're having different problems. Joe had given her a deal for her birthday. I looked it over. It's a squirrel about that tall, a wooden squirrel. But I wrote on there from Joe. I didn't want to carry that heat. And like was mentioned up here today, does Al-Anon work? Certainly it works. We wouldn't even be, I don't think, having this meeting if it wasn't for Lois and Ann getting Al-Anon started. Because they'd have messed the whole deal up. But the ladies got in and they had a lot to give. And they tended, I didn't know what they did in Al-Anon for a long time because I heard all those giggles and laughs. And I was, well, then they're talking about me. And I'm not a very good subject, but that's what I thought. And I kept going. There was things that I did that Joe says don't do that no more. Well, you know, it gets dark every day. Now, Joe wasn't with me all the time. So I did a thing or two that he did not approve of. And I'd been caught before, but I didn't want to be caught again. And it was I thought, a legitimate deal. I'd loaned a buddy of mine some money. And Joe had told me not to do that. And anyway, his obligation to me never did. I didn't get the money back. And I am hot. And Joe finds out about it. Oh. And this isn't an excuse, but it was the reason I went to Pinky's and bought a case of whiskey. And that's why I've got a different dry date than the one I started with. I was drunk 12, 14 days, and I came back, and I've been back here 10 or 15 minutes at a time or an hour at a time since then. And some people looked and said, oh, Bob, I'm sorry that happened. Others give me the cold shoulder and turned around and walked off. It's their problem, not mine. Drunks get drunk, and painters paint, and golfers golf. And but I had to start doing things in a manner, and so I had to dig pretty deep because I didn't really know what all that was. I had to continue to learn what alcoholism is. I found out in living that there's a lot of people seem to go to AA and have no idea what alcoholism is or is not. And I've experienced some people going to Al-Anon. They know some words, they know what it says on the wall, but they don't know what it is. And the lady I was married to, after about a little over 18 years, and I've never said she's not a good woman, she is. She quit going to Al-Anon. I think maybe the last meeting was we got in the car and I backed out and started down the street. She says, you backed out too fast, you're going too fast, and the radio's on the wrong station. And so I went down and turned around and went back and pulled up in the driveway. She says, what are you doing? I said, you can drive this car, I'm going to get my pickup. And I did. And it wasn't long after that I sat down with her and told her that I'm going to go down and see the lawyer, and I said, we're going to get a divorce. And I said, you need to get more out of life than what you're getting out of me. Now this, if you've never walked down that deal, let me tell you something you got to look forward to. And I had never known of or heard of spousal support. Well, see, I went on and had put her through tech. She went through there and got a teaching certificate, had taught a little bit, but she wasn't teaching right then. Makes a big difference. And so I learned a lot in the next 18 months. That's how long it took to get this deal ironed out. And during that time, one time, I get this phone call from her. She says, the daughter got the car out of the garage last night and went out to the bowling alley and had her a few drinks, and coming back home, she had a wreck. I said, well, is she hurt? No. But says, my car's broke. I said, well, your lawyer, my lawyer's got the title. That's all I know, and you got insurance. And I hung up. I don't want it to cost too much to talk to her. And so anyway, about 15 minutes, my lawyer calls. He says, Bob. And he asked me the question, did she call? I said, yeah, about the car being broke. And says, well, you got to do something about that. I said, what do you mean I got to do something about it? You or the other attorney has the title. You got to do something. Buy another car. Well, I don't like hearing that. I said, well, what do I do if she tears it up? You're going to buy another. Well, so I did. And, but eventually, like anything else, it came to it. She wasn't even up there when the judge read the deal. And I've never said she's not a good woman. I wouldn't say that at all. But she quit going to Al-Anon. They got tools in there that allow people with that particular problem to deal with. Al-Anon's been a lifesaver to so many people. I remember Arbutus, bless her heart. We were sitting down there at the convention in Abilene. Arbutus is sitting there, and Evelyn and Barbara and I, and we were over smoking all we could. And Arbutus, she says, you know, Bob said, it's just good to be here. She took a deep breath. And she said, do you know I stopped smoking? I said, no. Yeah, she said, I'm up to a 32B. I thought, what? God damn. Well, anyway, that's Arbutus's business. But things here that have been so good to so many, and in living, it's a thing Joe told me a long time ago. He said, never in the history of time has so many people owed so much to so few like Bill and Bob. They're the ones that put this deal together. And it fits good. It's still alive and well. We got a lot of AA groups. Those in West Texas have dried up a little bit here and there. I found that the God of my understanding for me has gotten bigger, gotten bigger, gotten bigger. And it comes under the heading of my business, how big my God is. I know this, that he's much of a gentleman. He don't come in where he's not wanted. And I've opened that door over and over and over again. And it's never failed me. I've made a lot of mistakes in living sober. And after the divorce, I wasn't getting a divorce to get married or go with anybody or do anything. I just needed out of the trap I was in. And it was with my sponsor's blessings, always. And probably 6-8 months later, I met a lady. I'd known her. And we went to eat. And this and that, and probably another 8 or 9 months, well, we got married. Now, my experience in AA is that we're all diagnosticians. If we don't feel good, ask next to you somebody or across, they'll tell you, oh, I know what's wrong with you. And of course, she was telling herself. After about 2 years, she didn't feel good. And I had to talk at a deal down south, and she had been in and out of x-rays and this and getting the hot gas stuff. And anyway, I said, I made arrangements. My dad had had quite a few surgeries, and I said, I've talked to one of the doctors. We get back, we'll park the motorhome out there and we'll check you in. That's fine. Checked her in on July the 5th. Dang it, July the 1st of 1985. She passed away on July the 10th, 1985. Cancer of the liver. I had learned in here that what I have to do is bury the dead and go on about the business of living. And that's what I did. And she's not the first one that I've helped bury or bury in AA. But I was going along, and I had a business in here in town and another at the lake, and I really can't multitask. I'm not good at that. And the facility at the lake demanded I be there. And treatment center there, and I was having to sit in a seat that I didn't really want to sit in. And I'm having trouble getting people to do things like I want them done. And you're licensed by the state, and the licensure restricts you quite a bit. And my wife, Barbara, she was administrator of the Ask House in Lubbock, and she was the next patient of the retreat. So I called her and I said, can I do this? She's more familiar with the standards than I was. And no. I said, okay. And so things are going along. I don't know, 2 or 3 months later, I called her and I said, I got stuff I need to talk to you about. And I said, can I come by and we drink a little coffee and you guide me a little? And she did. And this went along for months. And I got better at what I was supposed to do. And so it took a little time, but I made her aware. I said, you know, you're quite a bit younger than what I am. I'm older. I knew her dad. I talked to him, and she got 2 daughters, and I talked to them, and she said it doesn't seem that your age difference has ever made any difference. And I said, okay. So I asked the lady to marry me, and we've been married now for since 1988. And it's a deal. She'll tell you the truth. I may embellish something a little bit, but she'll tell you the truth. In all these years, we've never had an argument. It was our agreement when we went down that aisle and got married that we would practice these principles in all of our affairs. And it was a wedding that was grounded in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's still that way today. Of course, Father Larry's the one that did it. I kept telling him he did a good job. And so, you know, life's been good for us. I've got 3 kids. One of them has never drank much. The youngest boy, he lives up in Kansas. He goes to AA. He's been going for, I think, about 32 years. And I've got a daughter that's a drunk. That's it. That's her choice. And but she's still alive. Barbara's got two daughters. The oldest one is a beautician. Beauticians know everything. You don't know one or have one by you, you just call one. They're very knowledgeable. And she can drink a little old drink of something, about half of it. Oh, no, I don't want any more. I feel that. Magic. That's what I've been looking for. And the other one, she'll stay sober in AA with a sponsor 5-6 years, and then she goes to start doing things her way again. It just never has worked. But that's all right. She's still alive. This AA, I hear people say it's changed, and I don't believe that. I don't think AA's changed. People in rotation in New York, they want to change some of the wording here, some of the wording there. And a lot of good examples of sobriety. Now, I've been put out with Al-Anons, and I hate to share this, but ever since they built that new building, that's been a long time ago. And then, see, my mother, she passed away when she was 90, and she still went to Al-Anon. But she used the big book as the basis of her recovery in Al-Anon. My dad, he did die sober. He hadn't been sober too long, a few years, and he died when he was 67. And he did everything in his life the way he wanted to do it, and that's it. I can't tell you why I'm still here. A lot of things have happened. But that's all right. I've had 3 different kinds of cancer. And I haven't been selfish with it. My wife's had a lot of different kinds of cancer. But they got doctors, and you go to it and tend to business. And that's okay. That's just an illness. But this thing of alcoholism, it affected me physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. From the longest hair on my head to the tip of my toe. And it's still there. It's the biggest romance I've ever had in my life. And it's all right. I respect it. I do not trust it. I've seen people trust it over and over and over again. We've been blessed